Hi everyone! So a few weeks ago I had an Ask Me Anything on my Instagram, and I had somebody ask me if I've had any paranormal or supernatural experiences. And I have had a few, but I mentioned one in particular, that my family and I all heard a Banshee one time when we were in Ireland. And I got so many replies of people asking to hear the story, and I figured I would make it into a video because it's kind of a lot. So for anyone who doesn't know what a Banshee is, it's a female spirit from Irish folklore, and she basically screams or wails. And this is generally a sign that someone in your family is going to die. She's basically an omen of death. So if you do hear her screaming, then you know that someone in your immediate family is going to die. And that's how the story goes. So this was actually quite a few years ago. I was about 13 years old. My family and I were on holiday in Ireland visiting my grandfather. And we were in my grandfather's house. It was late at night. We were in the kitchen / living room area, and we're sitting down with the TV on and enjoying a cup of tea, as you do in Ireland. The windows were all closed, the TV was on quite loud, so any noise outside would have to be very loud for you to hear it inside. So we were all just sitting there enjoying some tea, and all of a sudden we heard this horrible sound coming from outside. When we first heard it, we were like, oh my gosh, there's an animal dying outside. So we all got up and went outside the front porch. And when you walk outside of this house, you can't see anything. It's absolutely pitch black. There's no light pollution. There's no houses around. There's no street lights, obviously. You're in the middle of nowhere. You really can't see anything. It's absolutely pitch black. So when we walked outside, we all just froze, because the sound that we heard was not an animal. It wasn't human. It sounded like something not from this earth. It was such an unearthly, haunting sound that we didn't know what to do. We all just looked at each other in absolute disbelief of what we were hearing. All of us knew what a Banshee was. If you're Irish, chances are you've heard about the Banshee from your parents or your grandparents or somebody. We stood there staring in the direction that it was coming from, and we all knew the direction it was coming from was from a house. It was completely abandoned, overgrown, and said to be haunted. So when we all knew that this is where the sound was coming from, we were like, okay, this is a spirit. This is not human. There's something paranormal about this. The strangest thing about the sound is that it didn't feel threatening. It was absolutely terrifying to hear, but it didn't feel like it was threatening. It didn't feel like we were in danger, if that makes sense. In fact, we wanted to get flashlights and try to go find this thing, but none of us had flashlights. Cell phones weren't a thing back then. We didn't have the proper stuff to go exploring when it was this dark out. So we stood there and listened to this, and it went on for about 15-20 minutes, I think. It's so hard to explain. It just felt like I could hear it and I could feel it in my head. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. I'll never be able to explain it. I genuinely don't think it was an animal. This went on for 15-20 minutes continuously. There was no breaks or interruptions in the sound, and finally it stopped. It came to such an abrupt stop, and then just silence. When it stopped, we all kind of looked at each other and said, oh, okay. So this scared the hell out of all of us. I did not sleep that night, and basically we were all wondering, who is this Banshee telling us is going to die? It was something I've never experienced in my life, anything even close to that. I tried finding a sound online, like Banshee screams. Anything that I found wasn't really close to what we heard that night. So what I did is I bought a bunch of sounds online, and I kind of meshed them together to make the sound that I think really mimics what we heard that night. So I'm gonna play it for you now. Imagine hearing that outside, surrounded by pitch black, knowing that you're surrounded by just empty fields and a house that is supposedly haunted. Terrifying. I wanted to get my parents to share their point of view on this situation as well, because obviously they were there with me. They unfortunately live in Ireland, so I'm going to have to do a Zoom call. Hello, Mom and Dad. Nice to see you guys.
Hi, Sinead. So nice to see you.
You were both obviously there when we heard the Banshee.
Yeah, we were there, heard it loud and clear.
How long did it go on for?
I'd say at least 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was a long time.
15 minutes.
It was the most unearthly, unnatural sound I've ever heard.
I've lived in the country for 25 years, and I've heard all kinds of animal sounds, and I've never heard a sound like that before. Truly to it. It made you want to go there, even though it was pitch black. It was pitch black dark. The mother wanted to get a flashlight and go down. It felt like there was a magnetism to it. It felt drawn to it. The next day, I got up in the morning. I went over to where we thought the sound came from, and I checked all the fields and everything for signs of animal struggle or blood or whatever if an animal was attacked, but there was no sign. Everything was clear. The ground was cleared and nothing was disturbed. So
there's an old abandoned house in the field behind where we were hearing the sound from. So that old abandoned house is actually supposed to be haunted. So your father even went up around that house and in through it to see if there was any sign of something struggling there. But if anything had been in that much distress and screaming and crying the way it was doing it, there would have been blood everywhere. But even besides that, there's no way it was an animal because it went on for so long, uninterrupted, just constant.
You can't even describe, I don't know how to describe the sound. I could never associate it with an animal I've heard. And as I say, I lived in the country for 25 years and I've heard every animal imaginable. And this was something else. I've never heard anything like it.
Well, immediately it came to our minds. We looked at each other and I said, "Is that Banshee?" Your father said, "That's what I'm thinking it is." You know, your Uncle John was in a hospital in Canada at the time. And I honestly was afraid that we were going to get a call in the morning to say that he had passed away during the night. He did have an episode during the night where they had to resuscitate him. So he did actually die during the night. But I was waiting on the call because it is supposed to announce the death of somebody in your family. And even to hear it from inside the house because Dad had been deaf. The TV was up full blast as usual, so it's almost impossible to hear anything. But we heard it over that and through the windows.
We figured it was Banshee, believe it or believe it not, but it was a sound that didn't scare you. And you'd imagine it should have scared you because of the high pitch and thinking it was a Banshee, but it didn't scare.
It just kind of made your hair stand on end.
It was, I say, it was magnetic. It would draw you towards it. We think it lasted about 15 or 20 minutes. It didn't go on for a long, long time anyway. Then all of a sudden it just total silence.
It did sound like a woman screaming. Not screaming so much as cross between screaming, wailing, mourning. I don't know how you describe it.
Distressful. It's like a distressful sounding, I suppose you could say.
Well, there was only one explanation we all came to. It was the Banshee.
That was our explanation, but we don't know if there's a logical explanation for it.
I sent you the sound that I made of the Banshee. Do you mind playing it and telling me if that's similar?
I think so. I think it's very similar, yeah.
It's not exactly the same, but it's
similar. I think when you hear that sound, the sound I heard that night, or we all heard, I think it's a sound you will never forget.
If you see a Banshee, what's supposed to happen if you actually see it?
There was a story on my grandmother's street. A woman was looking out her window and saw the Banshee. People were walking by in the morning. She was still standing in the window. She froze completely. And she was like that for, it took, I think, something like 12 hours after she saw the Banshee to unfreeze and be able to move again.
There's a story about going out our road about a mile outside. There's a fella called Paul. He was supposed to have seen a Banshee. A small woman walked over across the road in front of him. Like, didn't do anything to him, but it scared the living daylights out of him. He said he felt blood drain out of the whole body. But he said it didn't, as I say, just the woman, or whatever they call her, Banshee, just kept going and disappeared.
Okay, thank you, Mom and Dad, for agreeing to be on this. I appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome.
Okay, stay safe.
Bye-bye, we love you.
Okay.
So I consider myself a pretty rational, reasonable person, but there was no explanation for that sound we heard that we can think of, aside from it literally being the Banshee. I know it's crazy. I absolutely know that, but having heard that sound and being there that night, I cannot possibly think of another explanation. I can't. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just so you know, that Zoom call with my parents was actually an 1.5 hour long phone call. Once we started talking about the Banshee, we kind of expanded onto other Irish folklore and the conversation just took off. So if you guys enjoyed this, or if you enjoyed the Irish folklore and you want to hear a little bit more about it or more paranormal experiences, let me know in the comments and I can definitely make more videos like this because I really enjoyed making this. Thank you guys for watching. I love you all. Bye.